I never thought I would set foot in Ashwood again. Yet there I was, steering my rusted car down the winding road that carved through the pine forest like a scar, the gray sky pressing down so low it felt like the clouds were watching me. This was the town where I was born, the place I had sworn I would never return to after my mother died, and my father locked himself away from the world. And yet his death had dragged me back like a hook through flesh. A legal formality, they'd said, just sign papers for the old house. But as soon as I passed the leaning, "Welcome to Ashwood" sign, its letters faded and splintered by decades of rain. Something inside me tightened with a cold old dread. The air itself felt wrong, thicker, like breathing through wool. And the silence had weight, broken only by the creak of the pines and the distant hollow echo of my tires on cracked asphalt. The town was smaller than I remembered, or maybe it had shrunk in my absence, its empty storefronts staring with black window eyes, its street lamps bent like wilted flowers. And there, just as I remembered, stood the old phone booth on Main Street, the only thing in the town untouched by time, its glass unbroken, its chrome frame gleaming like it had just been polished, and even from my car I felt it watching me, waiting, as though it knew I had returned. The house loomed at the end of our street, a skeleton of peeling paint and sagging wood, porch half swallowed by weeds, and as I stepped from the car, the air seemed to hush, the wind halting mid-breath, and for the briefest instant I saw movement in the upper window, my old room, a silhouette that melted into the dark when I blinked. Though the place had been locked for over a decade, but grief dulled fear, and I stepped inside, the floorboards whining like something waking up, the smell of rot and dust thick as old secrets. And when night came, the house grew so still it felt like a held breath, and from somewhere far off, carried thin through the cold night, came the distant shrill cry of the phone booth, ringing and ringing and ringing. I told myself it was nothing, just wind or some loose wire sparking in the dark. But when the sound followed me back into the house and grew louder in my ears, a buzzing hum just beneath the silence, I knew it wasn't. I lay awake in the same bed I'd slept in as a boy, watching moonlight crawl across the ceiling. And at exactly 3 a.m., my phone vibrated on the nightstand with an unknown number, and before I could think I answered, whispering, "Hello," into the cold glow. Silence, then breathing, wet and slow, like lungs filled with water. And then a voice said my name, not Eli, as people called me now, but Elias. The name my mother whispered to me before she died, a name no one else living should know. And before I could speak, the line went dead, and my phone screen went black, not dark. Black, like an absence of anything. The house around me seemed to shift, shadows clinging tighter, the corners stretching further away. And when I finally fell into a shallow half-sleep, I dreamt of the booth glowing faintly green in the center of the town square, its glass fogged with the shapes of hands pressing from inside. The next day, the town felt thinner, the sky paler, like someone had drained some layer of reality overnight, and the few people I saw in the diner stared through me as if my face were blurred. One old woman clutching my arm with claws of bone and hissing, "Don't pick up at 3, they hear through the lines," before scurrying away like a windblown leaf while the cashier's lips moved with no sound, like his voice had been stolen. That night I barricaded my door, stuffed my phone in a drawer, and tried to drown the silence with music. But at 3 a.m. sharp, it began vibrating again through the drawer, through the floor, through my bones. And though I fought it, my hand moved on its own, pulling it to my ear as though something were inside the wires guiding my fingers. And the voice on the other end spoke secrets from my childhood. No one could know. Where I buried the dead bird behind the garage. How I cried when my father locked me in the cellar. And each word darkened the room until I was certain I was floating in a void. And when I woke the next morning, the clocks all said 3 o'clock, though the sun was high, and the town outside was quieter than death. I had to know what was happening to me, what this thing was that had wormed its voice into my life. So I went to the library, though even walking the streets felt like wading through thick syrup now, the air resisting me. The library was empty except for the old librarian, who didn't look up as I passed, her lips moving as though murmuring to someone I couldn't see. And in the basement archives, I found a box of yellowed newspaper clippings about disappearances stretching back to 1947, all tied to the same thing. The hollow line, a string of cases where people reported receiving mysterious calls at 3 a.m. before vanishing from their beds. Their houses found the next day perfectly intact but utterly empty. Clocks frozen at 3 o'clock, food still warm on plates. One photo from 1961 showed a man answering the phone booth, his face blurred like wet paint, and behind the glass stood tall, thin shadows with blank faces pressed against the panes. Their limbs too long, too jointless, like marionettes without strings. And when I blinked, the photo was gone, replaced by blank paper, and the librarian was suddenly standing inches from me, whispering, "You've heard them now," her voice overlapping with itself like multiple recordings out of sync. And then she was gone, and I was alone in the stale dark. That night, the calls didn't come from my phone anymore. They hissed from dead radios, from unplugged lamps, from the hollow pipes in the walls. Every object with a cord whispering my name. And when I smashed them, the wires writhed like veins, and the booth outside shone brighter, its light pulsing like a heartbeat. And I knew deep in my bones that every person who had ever answered it was still inside it somehow, waiting, calling, reaching out through the lines. Time began to slip after that. Days bled into each other, clocks spun without ticking, and sometimes I would blink and find myself blocks away from the house with no memory of walking, the town folding and warping around me like paper in fire, buildings stretching tall and then sagging low, streetlights bending toward me as I passed like curious insects, and in the cracked windows I saw my reflection grinning when I wasn't, its eyes black and endless. And each night at 3, the calls came from every direction, the static rising to a scream while words burrowed into my skull. "Join, U.S., come home. The line is hungry." And I felt my body thinning like old tape, my thoughts skipping like scratched vinyl, reality itself glitching as if something were taping over me. The streets were empty now, houses collapsing into themselves like rotten fruit. And when I found the diner again, its interior was black char and ash, though the outside was untouched, and the old woman from before was seated at the counter, skin gray as wax, phone cord coiled around her neck like a noose, her head cocked at an impossible angle as her mouth whispered, "Answer, answer, answer," without sound. And when I stumbled back into the street, the booth was inches away, though I was sure it had been blocks from here, its door yawning open, the black receiver swinging slowly like a pendulum, dripping something dark that hissed when it hit the ground, and I ran without knowing where, the town melting behind me. But no matter where I turned, the booth was ahead, closer each time, humming like a swarm, promising the end of everything in the comfort of silence. And I knew then that I had already been chosen, that the moment I answered that first call, I stopped being entirely human, that something was pulling me across the line, unraveling me. That final night I didn't try to fight. The phone on the nightstand cracked and bled from its screen, numbers crawling like centipedes, and the voice, my mother's now, soft and broken, begged me to come home, to stop running, to step across. And though I screamed and clawed at the walls, my body rose on puppet strings, floating down the silent street barefoot, while the world around me folded inward like collapsing paper scenery, the sky turning inside out to reveal black static shot through with screaming faces. And the booth waited at the center of the void, glowing a sickly green, its glass slick with writhing shadow shapes pressing from the inside. And as I reached it, the street fell away behind me into black nothing, and my phone fused into my palm, hot as molten glass, and the door sealed around me and the receiver lifted itself and pressed to my ear. And inside there was no sound except ringing, endless, eternal ringing, until I realized the sound was coming from me, that I had no body anymore, only a voice, and I could see them all around me in the static, the missing ones, their faces stretched and smiling, too wide, their voices braided together into one endless scream. And then there was nothing, not even dark, just the hollow line stretching forever. And tonight, at exactly 3 a.m., your phone will ring too. And if you answer, you will see my face smiling in the glass behind you.